So hi everyone, my name is Nick. I'm the Communications Officer at the New Trust, and with me today is Chloe Day and Sarah Reed. And rather than just have myself introduce you, Chloe, who are you?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Chloe. I'm Paragon Manager for Dorset, Paragon Service in Dorset. So we are the domestic abuse service. We look after stalking as well within that. So we offer the outreach service, refuge, those types of things that people might have heard of.
And I might as well also sort of add on to that. We do have a stalking specialty, don't we, in Dorset? What does that entail? What is that called, etc.?
Absolutely. So that's our independent stalking advocacy caseworker. You'll often hear it as ISAC for short. Do love an acronym. So ISAC is what you'll often hear. So that's someone who can work on a one-to-one basis with any victim of stalking, and think of them as kind of your voice. So they're an independent person separate from all statutory services. So really that person that you can go to and completely independent, won't judge any situation that you're finding yourself in.
Great. I think it's a good segue actually into introducing Sarah Reed. So who are you, Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I am also a manager for Paragon Dorset Domestic Abuse and Stalking Services. All of the above, which Chloe has just said as well. I'm not going to go over that and bore everybody with my bit. But yeah, absolutely right, Nick. We do have the specialist stalking service, advocacy service, and we also hold within Dorset the stalking clinic, which is for high risk, high harm cases of stalking.
And what exactly is the stalking clinic? I think one's actually taking place next week. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Stalking Clinic is a meeting that is held on the last Thursday of every month. There is a panel that meets, and that consists of ourselves, Paragon Dorset, the ISAC, the police, CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, forensic psychologists, probation, mental health. Anybody else that you can think of, Chloe?
No, I think you've got the basics there, yeah. And then we kind of just invite anyone else along that may have involvement with a particular case. But yeah, we try and keep it small and succinct to start with, people who are signed up to our agreement essentially, and then go from there if additional people are needed.
So at this meeting, we discuss, as we're using the terms of stalking, the victim and the perpetrator. So we're not there only for the victim and to look at how we can keep that person safe, what they're experiencing and suffering, but also we look at the person who is causing the harm, the perpetrator, to see what we can put in place to help support them with their with what their obsession really, and what's led them to that, and how we can best support them moving forward.
And again, I think that's a very good segue into actually talking about what stalking is, because there's a lot of ideas floating around out there. I think a lot of ideas have come from media and have been popularized, even glamorized, as a matter of fact, in a lot of shows, television shows and series out there. So what exactly is stalking, Chloe?
So for us, we'll try and keep it simple today. So think of it as a pattern of fixated and obsessive behaviour. And for us at Paragon, we like to use the mnemonic 4 to help us remember it. So it's behaviour that's fixated, obsessive, unwanted, and repeated. So keep 4 in your head if you're trying to think, actually, is that behaviour towards me stalking? Is it more than harassment now? So although the actual acts of what's being done to you might feel similar in stalking and harassment, if it's starting to make you fearful, it's feeling like that obsession, then you're leading into stalking. So keep that in your mind really, when you're going along, and it's repeated, so that doesn't have to be loads and loads of times. Actually, we're only looking at 2 or more occasions, so it's not as kind of as many times as you might think. So if it's just that 2 or more, then we are looking at stalking, and often that involves some sort of fear response in you as well. So maybe fear of violence, but also fear of maybe you can't go out anymore, maybe you've stopped doing your normal activities, so your life has become affected. Then again, that's stalking rather than harassment.
Absolutely, all of that, and that can take many forms. So it doesn't have to be what you would normally expect when somebody says, stalking, that generic, somebody following you. It doesn't have to. It can be. but it's not just following. It can be many, many acts and many different acts, whether that be cyber stalking, whether that be monitoring your movements with tracking devices. Certainly, you know, on occasions we've had people say they've come down and furniture in their garden's been moved, or they've lost things in their gardens. Um, you know, their cars have been damaged, things have gone missing. So it's lots of things. And it's a very psychological experience when you suffer you know, stalking. It really does have an effect on you know, your general thinking, your day-to-day living, how you protect yourself. Because I think you have to remember that the person that's experiencing suffering the stalking knows best how to protect themselves, what works for them. So it's many faceted. So it really can be anything, and it's sometimes just for, you know, pertaining to you. So flowers being left, chocolates being left, letters being sent, and it's not always people that have been ex-partners. It can be strangers, work colleagues, you know, friends, family sometimes. But we do see predominantly that it is ex-partners, and that has a massive effect, certainly on those individuals. But then we sort of look at the wider effects that it has. So on families, on children, you know, it really does affect your day-to-day living. Your, you know, if you look at your work, your school, you know, monitoring what you're doing. People will, you know, quite often say they feel that they're crazy because this person knows where they are. How can they know that? It's almost like they're listening to those conversations, you know, and that feels very strange for people because they think they are going mad and that's not actually happening. But certainly it is, and it does. So all of those things and more. I think we'd be here for quite some time if we went through all of the things that we could use to describe that.
You mentioned one thing that stood out for me there because it was in quite a high profile case going back to, oh goodness, 2015, I think it was the Claire case. And her stalker was, you know, leaving chocolates and gifts. And when she went to the police, it was a bit of a, well, that's nice kind of story. Obviously, things have changed since then, and I'll bat this over to you, Chloe. So obviously, things have changed since then. The police are far more aware. What particular things do the police, or for that matter, you guys, look out for? Because obviously, as you said, it has to be more than twice. Are there any particular things that if you hear, you go, okay, that's stalking?
So for us, we're kind of definitely looking out for things happening that might feel strange, or that actually you've not asked for any of those things as well. Because I think and I think that's a really good example, Nick, about the gifts and things. That might feel nice, and outwardly people think, why would you not want to receive gifts and chocolates and flowers and things? But I think one of the quotes we've had in the past is when attached to those flowers, it says, "I'm watching you," or it says, "I know where you are," then it becomes different and it becomes scary and unexpected and unexplained. And I think your whole life can then fall apart from there, because if they know where you live, do they know where you work? So that's what we're looking out for, those kind of patterns, really. So we'll ask questions like, have they shown up at your house, at your workplace, at your friends, at the coffee shop where you go? Because we're creatures of habits at the end of the day as humans. As much as we think we might not, we do definitely follow routines. So something we're looking out for in stalking is the stalker aware of those routines? Are they able to use your normal daily life to track you and monitor you? And again, things like if it was an intimate partner, and as a young person, obviously you've got more routine sometimes because you're going to school or you're going to college. So we'll be asking, you know, have they shown up in those places? And often it can appear, again, quite normal or quite nice that they've shown up there. So, you know, it could be, oh, well, why wouldn't you like your partner turning up outside college and walking you home? But again, coming back to the person, the victim, if they don't want that, if they've not asked for that, and they've told the person, you know, I don't want to see you here anymore, and they continue to do that, then for us, we're hearing that and going, okay, yeah, that's not okay anymore.
And you also mentioned, I mean, Sarah mentioned it a moment ago about the tracking, because of course with technology now, things are a lot different to what they were, let's say, 10 years ago. And of course, with COVID, a lot of things changed because of lockdown, etc., etc. What have we seen as far as the use of technology? And I'll put this over to you, Sarah, because I've read a lot recently about how things have changed in that regard, because it's a lot easier now. And some very benign apps are created for good purposes. Like, for example, if your grandmother has a fall, you can make sure you know where she is, and that kind of thing. Or even putting an app on your child's phone, and obviously the child knows. How has that changed the dynamics of stalking?
I think certainly, yeah, and rightly so. As you said there, Nick, with lockdown, we did see an influx of referrals and an escalation in those behaviours because they are so accessible. So, as you said, for every good thing, so knowing when your children are, so you're able to make contact with them. And of course, we're worried for our children. For every good thing that is created, that is used in a very negative way. So we've seen a rise in tracking devices, very easy to purchase, magnetic, they clip on very easily to cars. We've actually certainly worked with a few people that have had tracking devices hardwired into their car, so they would not necessarily be able to see, under the wheel arches or, the bumpers, that sort of thing. They're in the engine. So there's multiple ways that technology has reached the perpetrators and also ultimately their victims. Certainly where we see children going between parents, when once a relationship has ended, you've seen them in teddy bears. Obviously, if there's FaceTiming, that sort of thing on iPads, that information is then transferred, recorded quite easily. Cameras can be put into screws to hold light socket switches. So from minuscule to the bigger Ring doorbells, obviously the internal cameras, that sort of thing. And actually, interestingly, I don't want to include this, but when I was looking for a house a couple of years ago, I went to view with my daughter, and there was a internal camera in every room. Now, that it really is, and it becomes normal. We normalize those behaviours. So, and we some it's far-reaching, I think, is the word that I would use for the technology that we are using. We see Apple, the Apple tags, those sort of things. We see if you're the main account holder, you have access through your phones to your children, ex-partners. You then have access to passwords. And if you are the account holder, you have to then make a decision whether you're going to keep your phone or whether you and your children or your other family members are going to get rid of your phones. So it really is quite far-reaching in the concept. And also, what we've seen is the utilisation of work equipment. So people that are using their work equipment to stalk, monitor colleagues or strangers even. We've seen that, quite a high rise in that contact and wanting to monitor. So yeah.
It is very interesting because you also touched on something that I brought up before we started this, and that is the normalization of stalking in certain areas. I'll put this over to you, Chloe. It's interesting because, and everyone laughs about it, everyone Facebook stalks. Do you know what I mean? So, when you go into a relationship with somebody, often you will do a little deep dive. I know my partner has. She said to me when she met me, she wanted to make sure that I wasn't, doing naughty things. Well, very, very naughty things. Yes, exactly. So that's a very normal sort of thing, doing a sort of a thing into that. So that's, as you mentioned, normalization of, because we are exposing ourselves. We're showing the world, ourselves. How is that? It doesn't make it difficult or harder, sorry, than it used to be.
I think our whole life is kind of online now, isn't it? Especially for younger people, and to cross over the line into what's okay and what's not okay often comes up, and we have really interesting conversations in lots of the training sessions that we run about this exact kind of thing, because when you stop and think, you're like, oh my gosh, am I stalking that person now? Because actually I have gone onto their account a few times before I've met them to check out if they're who they say they are, and things like that. And I think again, you have to keep thinking about what impact is that having on someone. And in the case of, you're just checking someone out to make sure you're meeting who they say they are, then ultimately that has a name, doesn't it? You're thinking of yourself in that, you're putting yourself in a safe situation, hopefully. But it can so easily turn into the stalking, and the reason that you're doing it is to enable you to complete those stalking behaviours, essentially. And it becomes unhealthy, and an obsession. That's when you're kind of bleeding into that. And I think the other thing to think about is, because everything is online these days, it's really hard for younger people to not put all that content online, especially what we're seeing often now as well is that's your job. So things like TikTok, Instagram, influencers, they use all of those platforms for their actual job. That's how they make money. So to say to some of our clients, don't do that anymore, that's just not possible. Their livelihood would be affected, all of those things. And actually, it's not even fair, that you would have to make those changes. So, we need to be pushing back more and getting more support in place for the stalker so that they stop their behaviour rather than asking victims to change theirs, especially in the life that we're living now, because you shouldn't be asked to step away from all those things. But it does make it much more easy for stalkers to use those, because, if you are using that to create content, often you'll link in other organisations, or you'll hashtag people because they're who you're working for or with, and then inadvertently that gives away where you are for the day, because that organisation, there's only one office space potentially that they go from, or you're filming in a particular location, and often you'll use like landmarks as that, because that's attractive on social media. So you're giving away your location in a lot of those circumstances. And there's a lot of live stuff now as well, isn't there? So you'll be streaming your content live, either from your home or out and about. So again, it's kind of the content that's out there. If you use it in, or you want to use it in the wrong way, then it's there for the taking, essentially, isn't it? So it does make it really difficult, to support people who are experiencing stalking, essentially.
It's a very, as you say, it's a very different, malleable world. Things are changing so quickly. I mean, I make, sort of review videos, for example, and before I even put the camera, I make sure that there's no, I don't know, bills lying around, in case someone can sort of see where I am. What sort of legislation has changed in this regard as far as stalking? Because things have changed over the last few years. I'm not quite sure who would like to comment on that.
I can start us off, Sarah, and chip in, because I will admit that the law, is neither mine or Sarah's specialty in that sense, and it does change a lot. So we try our best to keep on top of it. But essentially, they keep on, adding different behaviours, I guess, that you might call them, to the stalking offences. So once you go into legislation and you're looking at, section 2A and 4A of the stalking and harassment legislation, then you're tapping into a long list of behaviours that they start to list. So technology has started to come into that. So you can use that as part of your, case, I guess. If you are reporting to the police, you can bring in those things. And definitely, even if the law hasn't moved on quite as much, the police have. So the things that they now utilise, to be able to class what is stalking, they're definitely looking at all of your technology. They will seize phones, they'll seize laptops and things like that, so that it can be looked into. So pretty much anything you can think of that could be used as stalking, the police now will include that in their investigations. So it is improving, but I think it still remains a little bit unclear, just because stalking is so far reaching. It would be impossible to put everything on a piece of paper, and literally every time we do some training or talk to clients, something new is coming up. So I know the air tags that Sarah mentioned, that was something that came up in our training. We had no idea about that, and then someone goes, "Oh, have you heard of air tags?" And then we'll put that onto our cyber stalking list and things. So almost weekly you're adding new stuff, to it. So it is kind of impossible for the law to keep up in that sense, specifically. But it's also open enough to keep adding stuff to it in that sense. So I think it's the best that it could be for now, I guess, in that sense.
It's interesting because, as you say, technology changes, and the moment it changes, you have to sort of add and create new laws. For example, I believe a very large company out there, I'm not going to name names, as a matter of fact, it's my phone. They are saying that they will embed geolocations in your photographs, and you will not be able to disable that going forward. So, of course, that then gives location data to anybody who has a bit of a smart or has Googled it, to finding out where you were when you took that particular photo. So it's very interesting.
It is, and I think the recent thing in the news at the moment, isn't it, is around the alarm, the emergency alarm that's going to sound on mobile phones. So again, we're constantly catching our tails in trying to make sure that we're keeping people as up to date on the technology advances as we can, but at the same time we're encouraging that people use those devices to keep themselves safe. So it is a really tricky line to balance, and ultimately, we're always learning from the people that we're working with, essentially. And we're always kind of thinking, what's the consequence of this if we suggest that that's implemented? Could that be utilized as another way to stalk you, essentially? So not every piece of equipment is going to be suitable for everyone, and we just kind of try our best to listen to everyone and think, I guess, laterally around what can be done differently in this scenario.
I think as well, when we're talking specifically about young people, they are very upskilled with the latest thing. They are very quick on their phones, downloading, utilizing, and understanding what that means. And certainly, when we talk to young people and been out to work with the younger people as well, it's actually what does that mean to you? So everybody, certainly young people, is on TikTok as a platform, but that's certainly being used to manipulate, to create fake accounts, like all other social media. But once you've agreed to terms and conditions of TikTok, you agree to sharing everything about yourself. So that's one of the scary things about it. And I think lots of people, young people, possibly because it is so at your fingertips, it's so easy, and there's lots of platforms that you can use, certainly with influencers as well, but you agree to give everything away about yourself. And I think one of the key things that we say, certainly when we're doing our training, is if you put your name into Google and you come up, then something somewhere in your security is lacking. So that's a really easy first step that you can do when you're trying to lock down your privacy settings, that sort of thing, being really clear about what's public and what's private, and what you're actually sharing as well. And I think education along that is certainly the way forward.
I was just about to say education, of course, because when Facebook came out, what, 15 years ago or so, people were throwing their information out there because they didn't realize what it actually meant. And then, of course, you had sort of Cambridge Analytica putting out surveys that people happily filled out. So suddenly you have a data collection of 5,000 data points per person because people didn't realize they were literally giving their lives away. What can be done about that? I mean, how can someone who is being stalked through these different means, how can they help? I mean, what can they do to get help?
Well, I think statistically, and it's still the same throughout, when certainly we've had education along stalking and the understanding of that with Isaacs as well. Statistically, it's saying that people generally don't report the 100th incident, which is quite phenomenal, really. So that's been endured up to the 100th time before you actually think, what can I actually do with this?
So just to reiterate, there's 100 instances of stalking before somebody feels the need, or
Yes.
feels, wow,
that they can actually run with that. So certainly, if they're in a position where they're in their county, they have an ISAC or a stalking service, make contact with that stalking service, reports. I would certainly say if they feel able to do that, to report. If they don't and they have a stalking service, your ISAC will help support you in reporting. They will help support you collate information. They will listen to you and understand that you're not going mad. You've not lost the plot. This is happening, and we can support you with that. And by having an Isaac, building that relationship with the police and understanding, because there's still education there. And we are still helping support the police to understand the impact of on victims and what they're experiencing, and giving our best practice to help support not only victims, the police, and also the perpetrator.
So we do have an ISAC, so you can call us on 0800 032 5204, and we can talk to you about what that support might entail. We'll talk to you about your situation to get a bit more information about what's going on, and like Sarah said, either confirm with you that actually, yes, that is stalking, and what you're experiencing is happening. It's not okay, and we can get you some support that way. You can also email us. We're paragondorset@theutrust.org.uk. Or you can visit our website as well, paragonteam.org.uk, and all of the information is on there, telephone numbers, email addresses as well. You can also find us on Facebook, so again, Paragon Team, and you can ping us a message. We'll get back to you on that platform as well. So a variety there, but I think to kind of end on from me is trust your instincts. If something feels weird, if it feels bizarre, then talk to us, because the likelihood is, we can get you some help on that, and we can work through together to understand what is really going on. But definitely, if it's feeling strange, if it's feeling weird, then you're most likely not alone in that, and something is happening. So give us a call, we can have a chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Chloe, for that. I really think people will learn a bit today from this. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Good to chat.
Awesome.